Rome, the eternal city. From first sunlight, it is preparing itself. Preparing for the most important day in its Christian calendar. Once the capital of a great empire, Rome is now the center of a living religion. The same religion which the empire tried to persecute to extinction is today embraced by over 1 billion believers. One in every 5 of the world's population is a member of the Holy, Catholic and Apostolic Church. It is led by the papacy, the oldest surviving institution on earth, with a direct and unbroken line from St. Peter. To the true believers, his office symbolizes the rule of God himself over their hearts, their minds, and their consciences. It is Easter Sunday, the greatest day in the Christian calendar. Over 100,000 communicants have packed into St. Peter's Square. The blessing, Urbi et Orbi, to the city of Rome and the whole world, is now shared by untold millions far away from Rome. The Philippine Islands, where the Pope's visit is still alive in the memory. Descendants of the pagan Aztecs of Mexico. The Irish monks of Glenstall Abbey. The Vicar of Christ on earth holds an audience of over 1 billion in today's global village of the faithful. Rome inherited its place as the center of the Christian church. That church was born in a distant outpost of the Roman Empire. This is the land of Galilee, large tracts of it unchanged in 2,000 years. In Roman times, the people lived in poverty and debt, a place of social and political discontent. It bred religious fanatics, extremists. Some congregated in communities like the Essenes of Qumran. The radicals among them were prepared to risk their lives to bring about the kingdom of their God on earth. Jesus of Nazareth was such a man. His missionary life was concentrated into some 3 years and confined here, preaching around the Lake of Galilee. Here he recruited his followers. 12 were chosen as his apostles. All were Jews, all were male. The first to be called to follow this Messiah were Galilean fishermen, the brothers Andrew and Peter. Peter is portrayed in the Gospels as warm-hearted, generous, and impulsive. And down the years, he and Andrew have been regarded as typically poor fishermen. Is this view a correct one?
We're told that Peter and Andrew were from Bethsaida and they were fishermen. That to us suggests lower class. But in fact, in the ancient world, fish was the most important source of protein, and the price of fish was the most important economic indicator that you could want. If it went above the price of meat, then the government was seriously in trouble. The most ancient encyclopedia we have gives only 12 pages to meat and almost 300 pages to fish. See? Peter's brother's name was Andrew, which is purely Greek. There's no Semitic correspondent, whereas Peter's name was Simon, which is purely Semitic. So we must assume a bilingual family, that they would have spoken both Aramaic and Greek. Okay? Then also we're told, according to the Gospels, that they had partners and employees. So they would have been part of one of the biggest businesses in the lake.
Today, business is different. Thousands of sightseers, some devout, some inquisitive, flock here to Peter's house, over which a modern church is built. The archaeological remains, some 2,000 years old, have been remarkably well preserved. This is where Jesus stayed and cured Peter's mother-in-law. But these remains are not those of a humble abode. This was clearly a large house, the home of a well-off family.
Jesus' mission was to everyone. It had a special appeal to the poor and the underprivileged. But the poor and the underprivileged don't make good assistants. Very often they don't have the education. Certainly they don't have the leisure. To choose someone from an upper middle class family with an education, with some organizational ability, with different linguistic skills, with freedom from day-to-day toil, then that is the sort of people you need as assistants. So I imagine all the people who have followed Jesus on a regular basis were of the same social class as Peter.
But Peter is special, the spokesman, even the leader of the apostles. In Matthew's account of events here at Caesarea Philippi, Jesus renames Simon, Cephas, Peter the Rock. He goes on to say, "Upon this rock I will build my church, and I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven." This declaration was to resonate down the centuries. It was the ultimate basis of papal authority. Jesus and his disciples left the Sea of Galilee. His mission had another target to meet, and that could only be met in Jerusalem. The capital of the Jews, its people subjected to Roman rule, its skyline and its ethos dominated by the temple. Jesus' message about God's rule on earth threatened not only the authority of the Romans, but also the authority of the temple establishment. Had he stayed in Galilee, it might well have been overlooked. But here, in the capital, such sentiments were dangerous. The inevitable outcome, death. It would have been stoning by the Jews. By the Romans, it was the cross. And so it seemed another radical preacher had been turned to dust. But then, the empty tomb, the resurrection, the first Easter. Here in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, built by the first Christian emperor, some 300 years after the event, Christ's Passion is reverently related in mosaic. Some 2,000 years later, its awesome truth attracts those who believe. But at the time, then it was a different story. Men and women who witnessed or who believed in the resurrection zealously spread Jesus' story. These followers were Jews. What they preached was a form of Jewish revivalism, and for them that world was coming to an end. Their Judaic instincts were powerful and conservative, totally orientated to temple worship.
That strain continued in the church in Jerusalem. Peter first, and then he was succeeded by James, and they retained a very strong Jewish identity. Male children had to be circumcised, and they followed the Jewish customs of the dietary laws, for example, what food was permitted and what was not.
It seemed that Christianity would remain within Judaism, a pious and humble Jewish sect. But Jesus' ministry directly confronted both the Roman and the temple authorities. Christians were dangerous. They were to be suppressed, and leading the suppressors, the Roman Jew Saul of Tarsus. Until, that is, he himself was converted to the new faith. Immediately, there was conflict and schism.
Paul went a step further because he realized that Jesus had introduced the eschaton. It was a new age, and what had been true and valuable in Judaism was now subsumed into Christ. He was the end of the law, so that for Paul, one had to choose between the law and Christ.
The church in Jerusalem chose the law. Led now by Jesus' brother James, it was doomed. Constantly persecuted, it suffered. In 62 AD, James himself was martyred, and the church was weakened beyond repair. To ensure the exclusion of the Christians, a formal anathema was incorporated in the synagogue liturgy. May the Nazarenes be suddenly destroyed and removed from the book of life. But it was not destroyed. Under Paul's guidance, and with Peter's support, the Christian message spread abroad, and it spread quickly. Its first target of appeal were the Jewish communities abroad, estimated to be some 4 million strong. Within a few years of Jesus' death, the new religion reached the imperial capital, Rome. It was, in every sense, a cosmopolitan capital. People not only tolerated, but took a very lively interest in new forms of religion. And in old forms too. Some 50,000 Jews lived and worshipped here. Then, as now, it was a distinct and flourishing community.